harvesting energy from the sun, fighting climate change caused by human activity, conducting a proper energy transition. This is a vital and global battle. Solar photovoltaic is playing a key role in this mission, and this new source of energy is embedded within our economic fabric. After a very promising start, the European solar industry declined. So how can we propel the return of this industry on our continent?
Energy is as important as health, defense, and food on a European strategic level.
We have the technology, we have the market, all we need is local industry now.
Europe is still very strong in research and development. We have a remaining industry that suffered in the last years, and we need really to rebuild that.
And so I would say we have a need for a European renewable energy Marshall Plan.
In this collaborative film, we'd like to present you with the 3 reasons why we need to rebuild PV manufacturing in Europe now, and 3 things that need to be done in order to reach this goal. But first, let's take a quick look over the past 20 years. In the year 2000, Germany launched an ambitious installation program and was followed by other member states. Europe was pioneering solar technology on the global stage. Then, around 2005, China entered the game of solar cells and modules production.
Chinese companies started manufacturing of PV cells and modules, using equipment from Europe, by the way, but they have a good, strong political support.
Germany created the feed-in tariff. China created the industry mainly by making investment money available in form of credit guarantees.
European brands were suddenly facing heavy price competition, and they fought for an intervention. The European Commission launched an anti-dumping inquiry. The conclusion: China was selling below fair production costs. Among Europe's member states, long debates followed. The outcome was to impose a minimum import price. This temporary measure helped Chinese suppliers increase their margins, but failed to prevent many European players from going bankrupt or simply from stopping production.
And the end result was that the smaller European PV industry could not survive anymore. It was not competitive. It had too small production capacity. And therefore, in the year 2012-2014, the European PV industry was basically wiped out.
This industry was clearly not seen as a strategic priority for Europe. Today, Chinese market shares throughout the value chain are staggering. On the other hand, an annual trade deficit currently standing at 8 billion euros just keeps increasing.
I mean, we were fighting a lot, many years, to bring back PV production to Europe. And one of the hurdles was always that the market was available but not strong enough. And this changes now.
The first and main reason we can see is a clear upcoming market boom.
As an example, the International Energy Agency in its latest report shows that between 2021 and 2026, 95% of the new electricity generation capacities are renewable-based, and that solar is weighting more than 60%.
If you look to whole Europe, we will end up with 60, maybe 80 gigawatts which have to be installed per year. And this is something like a game changer now. There is a real market available, a home market.
Today, we are really at the brink of the solar revolution, where the cost is so much down that we can say photovoltaics is one of the lowest cost electricity to be produced on Earth.
So yes, solar is intermittent, but don't forget that we have battery costs coming down very, very quickly, and also green hydrogen going to explode over the next 5 to 10 years.
In addition, smarter grids and interconnected devices will enable a smoother integration of on and off generators. And regarding sustainability, despite myths surrounding PV not being that clean, studies show it is one of the most sustainable forms of energy. And there's still a lot of room for improvement. And good news for our subject, manufacturing in Europe would further bolster its environmental profile.
Photovoltaic is very easily deployable from small power plants to larger power plants. It uses actually not so much space. You could simply by covering the roof in most European countries, you would do the full electricity, and you have much more than roofs. I mean, you have roads, along the roads, you have parking places, you have agrivoltaics, thousands of possibilities.
In relation to land use, let's take 400 gigawatt additional PV by 2030 as an example. This would take up only a tiny part of Europe's artificial soils, even less agricultural land, and zero natural land. In economic terms, this represents around 100 billion euros worth of solar modules.
Even if you're not a big fan of solar, we will have to increase our yearly annual installed capacity by almost a factor 5 to 8. So we are just still at the beginning of solar, and we need to go much, much faster.
The next reason why it's time for a resurgence of Europe's solar industry is the availability of innovations and technologies. Let's head to IPVF, a cutting-edge research center on the Paris-Saclay cluster. IPVF was inaugurated in 2018 and was created by global players committed to energy transition. Their collaborative research focuses on the development of thin film, such as industry-ready perovskites and low-cost 3-5 cells.
The challenge of shipping to the market affordable, available in sufficient quantities, circular solar PV technology is the key target for all the R&I sector. We need to kickstart the production capabilities in Europe with proven technologies, and the manufacturing tools should be able to integrate the innovation, what comes out from the laboratories.
In their PV program, Helmholtz Zentrum Berlin focuses on emerging tandem and triple junction technologies, especially with perovskite and other novel materials. With more than 200 dedicated scientists, engineers, and students, HZB is among the global leaders. They currently hold the world record for perovskite tandem's efficiency.
If we look at the novel technologies which are closest to breakthrough, this is especially perovskite based. This is a very low material usage technology. It has a very simple value chain, and it opens the opportunity to really start a value chain, including production of modules, cells, and of course systems. A classic mistake has been to work on your own as your own company with your own investor promising your own unique IP. There's much more potential if we would work together.
Let's now travel to the Netherlands, to TNO in Petten and Eindhoven. In their unique lab facilities, TNO has been developing state-of-the-art technologies and applications for novel crystalline silicon PV. They're experts in thin-film solar with a focus on perovskite and pioneering different combinations of solar cells in tandem architectures.
We obviously also do other things like integration. We look into lightweight modules, rigid, flexible, new materials. So the integration, which will be way more important in Europe, being such dense countries, you cannot just put in fields and fields of PV. You need to be able to integrate them seamlessly in the built environment. And we work on circularity, and obviously we work on CO2 footprint, because that's where Europe can make a difference.
We've identified 4 technological areas that the European industry could use as leverage: high-efficiency cells, integrated PV modules, emerging new materials, and circular optimized solar PV.
Circularity for PV means we consider circularity from design to production to use and end-of-life phases of the PV modules.
Scientists at Forschungszentrum Jülich, one of the largest energy research centers in Europe, are not just developing materials and top efficiencies anymore, but are turning their attention to cradle-to-cradle technologies.
The deployment of billions of photovoltaic panels in the next years creates new challenges for research and industry. On the one hand, we have to generate the raw materials to build these panels. Current silver, aluminum and glass production may become insufficient in the early 2030s. On the other hand, we will have to manage millions of tons of solar panels when they reach their end of life. To address these challenges, we focus on extending the lifetime of existing solar systems, lowering the consumption of raw materials, and developing recycling concepts for PV. This is a large challenge, but recycling and circularity are a must.
With over 120 research groups and a yearly budget of over 600 million euros, European PV innovation breakthroughs are ready to support a local industry rejuvenation. The third reason why it's time for Europe's solar industry can be seen within a global context, one which is providing clear indicators. On global trade level, an increased competition among regional blocs. The COVID pandemic and the consequent transport cost crisis has questioned international supply chains. Finally, and sadly, the sudden outbreak of the war in Ukraine. All these factors are driving Europeans to seek more autonomy.
Europe has entered into a completely new world in terms of its energy security, or perhaps better said, its energy insecurity.
Before the war in Ukraine, it was 200 gigawatt until 2030, which is already very ambitious. That would mean about 17 gigawatt a year installation in Germany. But now they will even enhance this.
So, within our continent, a favorable context is unfolding. The Europe Zero Carbon Commitments, the EU Green Deal, and the Fit for 55 package, carried out by a renewed commission with voluntary commissioners. And on PV, the European Solar Initiative, driven by InnoEnergy, SPE, and ESMC, is meant to help financing mature projects. The next step is to constitute a solar PV IPCEI, or Important Project of Common European Interest. So now let's turn our attention to some inspiring solar industry players. Here we are in Sweden, where Evolar develops equipment and processes for large-scale production of perovskite solar cells. With over 40 years of experience in thin-film PV, its team has developed a unique evaporation technology to achieve high-performance, stable, and low-cost coating.
What has been done so far is that the European R&D community has really demonstrated the potential of this technology, both efficiency-wise but also stability-wise. We also need to make sure that we keep it and commercialize it here. We need a favorable framework for the local solar industry to be competitive again.
Let's now visit Grenoble in the French Alps, where ECM Group have been active in PV for 40 years, manufacturing furnaces for crystal growths and tube furnaces for solar cell production lines.
So the equipment and the technology that we proposed, that we developed, is completely ready. It's very mature. The monocast furnaces here are in operation in many customers. They produce daily ingots. And the TOPCon technology is also very mature, and we're ready to supply it to customers if we can here in Europe. On systems like this one, the carbon footprints of making ingots is probably the lowest in the world.
So all across the continent, from gigafactory projects to smaller startups, the ecosystem is getting ready. Global production capacity targets for 2025 are foreseen at these levels. However, reindustrialization is easier said than done.
Europe is okay in terms of wind. We have technology and we have industry. We are okay in terms of batteries technology, and we're building the industry. We are starting to build the industry on hydrogen, but we're absolutely nowhere on solar, even though we have the technology.
Here we present you with three axes which need to converge to make this happen. Unsurprisingly, the first axis concerns financial support, within the existing supporting instruments and in view of a future IPCEI. Grants and subsidies are very much needed and welcomed, and we have estimated that every euro invested could generate 2 euros in extra tax revenue. For speed and efficiency, we recommend the use of state credit guarantees in the form of a strategic package with 3 billion euros as soon as 2022.
These state guarantees can accelerate the implementation of projects and the scale-up of projects.
A second vital set of tools needed are level playing field measures.
Free trade, free market, competition, this was a motto for many years. But we see that the conditions are not always fair. So we need to be more proactive, more aggressive, sometimes more protective to try to really rebuild a strong industry in such a a key sector.
We have the advantage to promote equipment with very low carbon footprints and high sustainability. This should be recognized as a competitive advantage.
So that means if we produce a PV module, we have less CO2 embedded in this module as it would be produced in China. And that makes a big difference.
If we have a better technology which has a better cost or environmental profile, we should be protecting this technology with appropriate measures. And we should create the level playing field not just on cost basis, but on a complete basis.
Really have to establish some framework for the investors that we can keep also the production in Europe. And there are several measures how to do that.
So in a dedicated working group, we prepare recommendations on how to practically address this point. The French PV tenders are a very good example where the carbon footprint is valued explicitly for many years now. We are also working on eco-design, energy labeling and green public procurement, introducing environmental and potentially also social criteria.
A European defense instrument to protect us against unfair competition from outside. That is very urgent because it allows investors to start investing comfortably.
A key third set of actions would be to set up a smart strategic piloting within the right framework.
Our first order of business is to include photovoltaic manufacturing as an IPCEI in this European portfolio. This allows European countries, Germany, France, Italy, whoever want to support local PV industry to be legally allowed within the rules of the EU competition rules.
So the IPCEI would give us a platform that would, in the same time, provide us with an enormous positive market exposure, as well as a coordination platform to drive the growth, again, throughout the value chain in Europe.
It would be extremely useful to set up a kind of task force between key member states of Europe that try to push and put in place a strategy for really this reindustrialization of Europe along the full value chain.
We must be more independent.
We need a sustainable economy.
Sustainable energy transition.
We save transport costs.
Low CO2 footprints.
It will create jobs.
And we should start producing again from here.
There's no point in developing this far on the technological level if you don't take the next steps on the industrialization level and on the political level.